And now with a roundup of all today's stories is the ITV News at 10.
It was once a staple of the old Cold War, and now it's back. A suspected Russian spy unmasked at the heart of the British Embassy in Berlin.
What's important to find out is what the implications are for the security not just of the British Embassy, but of our embassies around the world.
So, what secrets might he have been passing on, and why? Also on News at 10 tonight. Could Kabul be about to fall? US intelligence gives it 90 days as the regime crumbles. It looks like this might have been the hottest day in recorded European history. The heat wave intensifies. The demand for food banks may be as great as ever, but Anushka reports on the fruit and veg left rotting in the fields. The travel fiasco continues. Time to ditch some of the dreaded tests, says the industry, and
It's a magic day. I hope Messi will win Champions League for PSG.
a new dawn. Lionel Messi on his continued passion for the beautiful game.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Once upon a time, the streets of Berlin provided the unforgettable backdrop to 1,000 spy stories, from prisoner swaps to dead letter drops. Well, it was all back with a bang today as a British man working at our embassy in the German capital appeared in court, suspected of selling secrets to the Russians, who have their embassy just around the corner. He's not a diplomat. He's 57, thought to be a locally recruited security guard, and because of German privacy laws, he is referred to only as David S. He was arrested at his home after an operation by German and British investigators. They think he has been in contact with the Russians for at least the past 8 months.
Close to the Brandenburg Gate, once the front line in international espionage, an allegation that's reminiscent of those Cold War days. The British Embassy in Berlin, where the Russian intelligence service is accused of recruiting a British worker. Named only as David S., he allegedly handed over sensitive documents in exchange for cash. The German foreign minister said his country is taking it extremely seriously.
Denn das geheimdienstliche Ausspähen eines engen Bündnispartners auf deutschem Boden ist absolut inakzeptabel, und wir stehen dabei in voller Solidarität zu unseren britischen Freundinnen und Freunden. Wir werden
Involved in the investigation are officers from Scotland Yard's counter-terrorism unit, which looks into alleged breaches of the Official Secrets Act. MI5 are also working with German detectives amid ongoing tensions between London and Moscow.
I'm very concerned by the news that we've heard out of Berlin. Of course, what's important to find out is what the implications are for the security not just of the British Embassy, but of our embassies around the world.
Anglo-Russian tensions are already strained. The UK accused Russia of the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury in 2018. That led to the biggest expulsion of Russian diplomats from the UK in history. And last year, Russia's intelligence service was accused of trying to hack British coronavirus vaccine research labs. Experts say the latest allegations against the Kremlin are no surprise.
It's all part of a pattern. It's part of how Russia views itself as being in conflict with this country, with Germany, with other parts of Europe, and there being no holds barred because it's already in a state of war.
Today's allegations aren't as serious as the notorious Cold War spies, names like Kim Philby and Guy Burgess. But they are a reminder that modern-day relations between Britain and Russia remain icy. And in an era of cybersecurity, old-fashioned espionage is still a threat.
And Ben joins us from Berlin tonight. Ben, fascinating story. What more do we know about the mysterious David S. and indeed the whole investigation into him?
Well, it's due to German privacy laws that we can only identify him as David S., which sounds very mysterious. We know he's 57 years old. We know he was arrested in Potsdam, which is a town just outside Berlin. We also know that he was a contractor here at the embassy. Now, what does that tell us? Well, it's highly unlikely that as a local hire that he would have had access to highly classified intelligence. He's also not eligible for diplomatic immunity, and that raises a curious question about the investigation as well. Given that this is British diplomatic territory, why are the German authorities taking the lead? Well, we understand that they can if the British are happy for them to do so, and we know that the two countries have been working very closely together on this investigation for some months now. There's been no comment from the Russian authorities tonight, and of course all of this is playing out here in Berlin, the city so famous for those spy games of the 20th century. A lot has changed since then, but we know, of course, tensions between Britain and Russia are still high. It is unusual for us to learn, at least, about spies being arrested in this day and age, but those big questions are the ones that I think need to be answered. How susceptible are employees or indeed local hires at embassies around the world, and how much sensitive information is vulnerable to this kind of espionage today?
OK, Ben, thank you very much indeed. Now, the seemingly unstoppable advance of the Taliban on Afghanistan's provincial capitals has cost the country's army chief his job. It has also made US intelligence reassess how secure the national capital, Kabul, really is. The answer, basically, it's not at all. They are now saying the city, filling up with refugees from overrun areas, could fall in as little as 90 days. Well, prior to the invasion in 2001, the Taliban actually controlled most of Afghanistan, except for a small section up there in the northeast under the opposition Northern Alliance based out of Faizabad. But by 2014, the extremist group had been pushed right back by government and NATO forces, controlling just 4 districts. Well, now, as you can see, the Taliban has regained large areas of the country, including 9 regional capitals, among them Farah, Kunduz, and the former opposition stronghold, Faizabad.
The road to Kabul is filling up. The smaller towns emptying of residents who chose to reach into the unknown. Their hometowns have been taken over by the Taliban. Most are too young to remember what that means, but almost everyone knows. The scene in Kandahar, the second city, under siege. And this was Farah in the west today, where militants dragged the dead through the streets. Until lately, the US had feared the collapse of the Afghan government by the end of the year. Now they think it could be within 3 months, perhaps even 1 month.
They have put out public assessments, which certainly we stand by. We are closely watching the deteriorating security conditions in parts of the country, but no particular outcome, in our view, is inevitable.
Perhaps in response to US criticism, the head of the Afghan army was sacked today. In an interview weeks ago, he said that his soldiers would repel the Taliban. Now his contract has been ended, soon his government might be too, but the Americans are still backing away.
Should the US not consider extending close air support, doing something, changing its strategy, rather than saying simply to the Afghan government, this is your problem?
Right now, I think it's very legitimate for the US government, for the UK government to ask, why should we send ground forces to fight for the Afghan government if its own military and people aren't willing to fight for it?
The capture of Kunduz appears to be complete. Soldiers from the National Army surrendering this morning. The battle here apparently over. At the airport, this helicopter belongs to the Taliban now. Tonight, ITV News identified it as an Mi-24 attack helicopter given to the Afghan Air Force to fight off the Taliban. India has been donating aircraft like these to the Afghan military now for several years. Its Prime Minister went to this handover ceremony in 2015. 4 years later, more were donated. You can make out the tail numbers 126, 125, and 123. This, the same helicopter which was pictured today with Taliban fighters. The rotor blades appear to have been detached, but this image makes a statement about the progress of the militants. What is happening in Afghanistan at this perilous moment was widely predicted, but it is the speed of it causing so much surprise.
And Rohit joins us from Washington. Rohit, anyone with a grasp of history will probably feel they've seen or read about this before. The fall of Soviet Kabul, the fall of Saigon, one could go on and on. It does feel like it's inevitable. It's bleak. You asked the key question there. Is there any sign of a change in tone from America's leaders?
Very little, Tom. We've heard tonight from the White House, from the State Department, from the Pentagon, and they all seem to be saying precisely the same thing, that the US will continue with its plan, that this is Afghanistan's problem, and that the Afghan army need to work harder to repel the Taliban. Despite that, there seems to be broad consensus that the US continuing air support may well save many lives. But there is something that also hangs over the US approach. Consider that most pessimistic of assessments of the fall of Kabul in 1 month's time. Well, 1 month from today is the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And there are people in Washington who feel what they call that split-screen moment. On one side, the mourning at Ground Zero. On the other side, the mayhem in Afghanistan. And there are people who do want to avoid that. But this is clearly a very, very serious moment for the people of Afghanistan.
OK, Rohit, thank you very much indeed. Well, Britain's involvement in Afghanistan ended, of course, with America's. But those 2 decades of conflict didn't just claim British lives. They altered others forever. Among them, John Dipnall. He somehow survived being shot in the chest thanks to his comrades. He died technically 6 times on the helicopter flight to hospital. Well, in our series, Afghanistan, Photo from the Front Line, we've been catching up with some of those who served there with C Company 3 Para. John was there when this picture was taken in 2006. And as we'll hear, he has another far more unwanted souvenir of his time in Afghanistan.
It was a tour that changed the lives of many of these young men of the Parachute Regiment. Some never returned from it. Others did, with physical and mental scars. John Dipnall has both of those.
When you see people get hurt, and when you put yourself in real danger, and you know you've put yourself in real danger, you can't come back and be the same person.
At 19, John joined the Paras rather than go to university. His first tour was Afghanistan. This was his first operation. An ITV News team capturing the Paras fighting off a Taliban ambush. A ferocious introduction to Helmand province, but John says he was still blissfully naive back then.
I'd never had a sense of my own mortality, really, until I got injured myself. I've seen people get shot before I was shot, and I'd seen people get hurt, but that was not me, that was always someone else.
As the reality of an increasingly deadly conflict set in, John saw comrades killed and injured in 2 tours before himself becoming a casualty. He has a vivid memory of the moment he was hit.
It was like getting hit in the chest with a baseball bat, but no pain. You kind of like bit in shock, you're bit out of body experience. But because there was no pain, I thought, it's hit me in the plate. So I rolled onto my back and put my hand under and pulled my hand away, and it was just red everywhere. I don't remember too much from there. I remember voices and people talking. Speaking to the guys afterwards, they managed to drag me back to a ditch to try and work on me. They found the entry wound but couldn't find an exit wound.
Ideally, a Chinook helicopter would be sent to recover a wounded soldier, but the risk of it being shot down was too great. John Dipnall was close to death. He gets emotional when he talks about the comrades who refused to abandon him.
So a couple of guys volunteered to drive out and pick me up and get me back.
That's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, they didn't bother sweeping for IEDs, they just drove straight in.
To get you?
Sorry, and yeah, then they got me on the helicopter and got me back. I crashed on the helicopter coming back. So they had to open me up from the helicopter.
By crash, do you mean? You just
died. I think I've died about 6 times on the way back.
6 times John was resuscitated. An army surgeon undoubtedly saved his life.
They had to remove a third of my left lung, my spleen, my left kidney, and obviously done damage to everything else along the way. I can feel quite a hard lump.
John has made an incredible recovery, but has a souvenir of Sangin he can feel beneath his skin. It is the Taliban bullet, fully intact and lodged too close to his spine to remove.
Are you constantly aware that you're carrying that piece of metal around with you?
You forget, to be honest. It's when you go through the airport and the metal detector goes off.
John left the military with its memories, good and bad, when he wasn't able to return to active soldiering. He has a new career, a happy marriage, a wife and children, but says Helmand Province is never far away.
Yeah, I kind of have a sense of guilt, to be honest, because obviously I survived quite a bad thing, and some of my other friends didn't.
He admitted something that might come as a surprise.
If I could go back to doing the tours again, I'd do them now, just because it's a massive part of your life. And like Sangin, we spent so much time there, and like so much blood, sweat and tears went into that place, and then you come away from there and you might never get to go back.
Like Vietnam, he hopes one day Afghanistan will be stable enough for him to pay a visit. No doubt taking with him that souvenir of his first trip. Paul Davis, News at 10.
Well, it is moving to hear those stories, and particularly at a time when Afghanistan, the country it was all for, is falling apart. You can see other reports from the series on our website, itv.com/news. Photo from the front line. And to be honest with you, they are all really worth watching. Now, after the wildfires and climate change alerts, it is perhaps not surprising that Europe appears to have experienced its hottest day ever. The current heatwave in southern Europe is thought to have taken the temperature in the Sicilian city of Syracuse to 48.8 degrees centigrade. That's almost 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
In Sicily, they call this heatwave Lucifer, and for weeks they've been in the grip of hellish wildfires on the Italian island. 7 planes have been flying missions to drop water on the worst-hit areas, and in just 12 hours today, firefighters were involved in over 300 incidents in Sicily and the south of Italy. While the blazes rage, the temperatures have soared, reaching an unofficial peak at 48.8 degrees centigrade, the highest ever recorded in Europe, in a heatwave that's expected to spread across the Mediterranean.
So Sicily itself, I mean, today might have been the peak with the 48.8. The main intense part of the heatwave will start to spread west into the western Mediterranean towards Spain, Portugal and northwest Africa, and eventually southern France. And I think we could actually see some records there, national, or perhaps even get close to what we recorded in Sicily, but time will tell.
It's all because of a plume of exceptionally hot weather moving up from northern Africa. In Algeria, wildfires broke out on Monday in mountain forests 60 miles east of the capital, claiming the lives of at least 42 people, including 17 civilians and 25 soldiers sent to help them.
Of course, we should be concerned because these hot events are damaging. They can kill people. So without rapid, sustained and strong cuts in greenhouse gases, we're going to see these heat waves become much more severe still and going up to unprecedented levels.
This is what a climate crisis looks like, say the scientists, destroying livelihoods and lives. Martha Fairley, News at 10.
With COVID compounding the hardship already felt by many families, the pressure on food banks is as great as ever. And yet we've discovered that literally tons of fresh fruit and veg is left to rot in fields, sometimes just because it doesn't quite match supermarket specifications. There was a £15 million government grant to help shift the unwanted crops to food charities, but that has been cut.
Row after row of beetroot, abandoned to rot. In another nearby field, carrots too. Not because these veg are inedible, but because supermarkets say they are the wrong shape, or size, or have slight pest damage, so are no good for their customers.
This is obviously a little bit smaller. There's nothing wrong, it's just like a baby beetroot, but we can't use it and we have to waste it. We can't sell it.
The farmer says up to 20% of crops can be discarded. That's a lot of food that could go to charity, even in just one field.
If we get some of the labour cost covered, plus the haulage cost, so potentially we can be sending up to 80,000 bunches for the whole season to charity.
80,000 bunches?
80,000 bunches.
The farm has been able to send some of this edible food to the warehouse of food charity City Harvest, thanks to a government grant, but that money has run out. New research from the charity wrap says there could be up to 360,000 tonnes of surplus food on farms that is good to eat. Ministers had put in place a £15 million pilot to help charities divert some of that food to families in need. Last year, the money helped drive up the amount redistributed by 2.5 times to almost 7,000 tonnes or 20 million meals. But the grants are not being renewed. That loss has hit the country's largest food distribution charity hard, because while demand is soaring, FareShare has seen a 30% drop in supplies.
That food is out there. The problem is that it is cheaper for farmers to currently waste their edible surplus food than to send it to charities like ours. We are seeing such an unprecedented level of demand still.
It's the next stage of the journey that matters most, getting to families at food pantries like here in Bath, where grandmother Kim has been moved to tears by the support.
It's just because they're so nice there.
If you could say something to ministers about the fact that they're not incentivising farmers to give food to places like FareShare, what would you say?
Well, I'd say, why not? It's a question, why not? Why aren't you doing it? There's people like me who never expected to be in these circumstances that need this.
The government says hundreds of charities benefited from the money it ploughed into redistribution, making changes that will help divert wasted food for years to come. But some charities certainly disagree. Anushka Astana, News at 10.
Even though thousands of people are jetting off on longed-for holidays, there are still plenty of demands on the government to lift more restrictions and make COVID tests cheaper and, frankly, easier. Holiday firms, not surprisingly, in the form of ABTA, say the tests are adding hundreds of pounds to the cost of a family holiday, and their complaints are being echoed by some Tory MPs.
Passport and tickets? Check. Luggage? Check. COVID test results? Well, that's a new addition to the holiday to-do list, and it still feels slightly surreal. For passengers at Luton Airport this morning, it's something they weren't too happy about.
It seems you're paying £150 for two tests, and then it sits in a Royal Mail office.
We spend money to go on holiday, and then we have to come back and spend more money on testing, you know.
Last month, Carol Stewart and her husband went to France to visit family. They spent more than £600 on tests, some of which didn't come in time.
You get told by track and trace if you don't comply, then you might be fined. So you're under all this stress, but you're paying top money for something you're not receiving.
The cost of tests vary hugely, and it depends on where you travel, but a fast turnaround test needed before you go to most countries costs on average £80. 2 days after you return, you're required to do another PCR test, likely to cost around £50. If you haven't been double jabbed, you then have to do another PCR test, which means for a family of 4 with teenage children, the total cost could be more than £700.
Well, the cost of certain PCR tests is absolutely extortionate. And if you look at the continents, they pay considerably less for these tests. And in fact, in many countries, the costs are capped by the government. So it's no sense at all that people, particularly families with older children, to whom this is really a hindrance in terms of the extra costs they will have to pay when coming back from their holidays in particular. Why should they have to pay this much?
The government says it is working with the travel industry to reduce costs, and that all private test providers need to meet a set of required standards. Those in the industry will hope that this can eventually be a headache of the past. Shihab Khan, News at 10.
An argument between two of the contestants on ITV2's Love Island has prompted almost 25,000 complaints, the highest the show has ever received. The moment that prompted the complaints to Ofcom involved Faye Winter confronting her partner Teddy Soares last Friday. Ofcom hasn't yet decided whether to launch an investigation. There is nothing like Olympic medal success for a British athlete to get children, or adults for that matter, interested in a new sport. But while skateboarding and BMX biking have been given a boost, some skate parks are under threat. Charlotte Worthington, who won BMX gold, of course, is trying to stop the closure of one of the best in the country.
High-level sporting success invariably requires the best facilities. This one, Rush Skate Park, is about to close, leaving only a couple of other sites in the UK. For the riders and skaters, losing these jumps and bumps is devastating. Given travel time to other locations, it may mean the end of their sporting ambitions.
I'm British champion BMX racer since 2019, and without Rush I would not be able to hold that title or be able to get that title at all. I feel like really let down for them because I know it's not just me that will have to give up my sport, but a lot of others.
I think she's going for it. Yes! Oh, she's got it! She's got it!
Team GB's gold medal winning Charlotte Worthington told ITV News today the loss of Rush and others will hit the sport at a time when it's riding high.
If it wasn't for my own local skate park in Manchester, which sadly has also closed, allowing me a lot of free entry and doing me a lot of favours like that, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today.
Winning is the product of practice. Getting it right involves getting it wrong. And while this site was always living with the threat of being redeveloped, the timing could not be worse.
It is gut-wrenching, and it's not so much for me, it's to do with the kids and the community within the skate park. There is a desperate need for a world-class Olympic training facility in the UK.
The council landlords were always clear the site was not forever and are trying to help with relocation, but time has run out and many fear the impact of its loss will hit the sport's future stars hard. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Stroud.
Well, still on sport, and there's been little to choose between Chelsea and Spain's Villarreal in the Super Cup final tonight. Chelsea, winners of the Champions League, of course, scored first against the Europa League champions. Hakim Ziyech got the goal. The only other goal in the 90 minutes went to Villarreal's Gerard Moreno. Extra time came and went, but Chelsea have just won on penalties. How about that? Finally, he might be 34 now, but there was no doubting Lionel Messi's passion for football as he faced the world's media for the first time as a Paris Saint-Germain player. The Argentinian superstar, who left Barcelona at the weekend, said he still had the same enthusiasm for the game as he did when he was a kid. He is already dreaming of winning the Champions League again, he said, but this time with PSG.
It's not every day that arguably the greatest footballer on the planet signs for your club. So the Paris Saint-Germain faithful turned out in numbers to welcome Lionel Messi this morning, and he seemed to appreciate it.
Más llegar acá, la felicidad es enorme. Estoy con muchísima gana, muy ilusionado de poder empezar a entrenar, intentar pelear por todo, para intentar conseguir todo, y ese es mi objetivo, ¿no? Seguir creciendo, seguir dando pasos, seguir ganando títulos, y por eso vengo a este club.
It was only last Saturday, in another press conference, that Lionel wept as he announced his departure from Barcelona. Because of the football finance rules in Spain, he explained, the club he joined as a boy could no longer afford him. But a couple of days is a long time in football, and in a video released by Paris Saint-Germain today, their new signing is all smiles on the plane to France. And so pleased is the Qatari-owned club with its new purchase, they filmed every moment of Messi's arrival. His new PSG face mask, his medical, his fitness test, and his first run out on the pitch at the Parc des Princes. While the deal was officially a free transfer, PSG paid Messi a £21 million signing-on fee, and his wages are reported to be around £560,000 a week. That means the combined salary of the Paris club's new front three of Messi, Kylian Mbappe and Neymar will be £121 million a year. PSG's president said that Messi's arrival would generate enormous revenue for the club. Well, they couldn't get the shirts on the rack fast enough in Paris this morning.
It's a magic day.
I hope Messi will win Champions League for PSG.
Yes, that's the club owners' sincere hope as well. And if they fail to win the Champions League again this season, well, no one can say they didn't spend hard enough. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
And that is sadly all we have time for tonight, but good night. And thank you very much indeed for watching.